Hi, I know it's been a while since I've made a video, but I just had to talk about Path of Exile 2 because frankly this game is incredible and I'm really excited to be able to finally play it after waiting for 5 years since its announcement. And I think it's worth talking about a little bit because I don't want other people who might be interested in the game to be intimidated by some of the systems or anything involved with it, especially when you take into account how complicated the first game was. And I just want to give my general opinion on the game itself, starting with just how I feel about it. And overall, I think the game is very, very well done. I haven't seen a game that's really caught my attention like this in a very long time. Obviously, I've been anticipating it for some time and looking forward to it, so that does help. However, at the time of its release, I've actually been very busy with personal events and stuff going on in my own life. And so I really haven't gotten the time to sit down and play the game as much as a lot of other people. I'm still only in Act 1 Cruel with my furthest character. But even not having played the game for more than 50 hours, I don't think, I am in love with it. It's something that's very special to me, having waited for so long, and I can safely say I'm not disappointed. The game itself is incredible. One of my favorite things about Path of Exile personally is just the soundtrack. I love the music to the boss fights. It's something that I really loved about the first game, and something that's hammered home even harder in the second one. The soundtrack is just incredible. As I personally do a little bit of music on the side, and I really enjoy hearing the works of other people, and just hearing some of those soundtracks is very cool to me. Something else I really love about the game too is just the way it looks. I mean, it's very easy to see that a lot of care was taken into putting detail into some of the things in the game, if not everything, and it's just such an improvement over Path of Exile 1 that it left me kind of stunned when I first started playing the game. I know there were a lot of trailers, and so I got a lot of sneak peeks, but even without the trailers, just seeing how it felt, just seeing how it was, did not really account for how I would feel playing the game. It really was immersive, really is immersive, and I think it's very well done. Now, something that I know some people have complained about, and it's been somewhat addressed by GGG, are the drops. The currency drops, in my opinion, are actually not too bad. I found quite a few orbs, but I know there were a lot of people that were having trouble finding things such as Exalt orbs. I think I found over 15 at this point, and I'm only in the Act 1 Cruel, so obviously there's definitely different experiences behind orbs. But I'm also full clearing instances just so that I get every little bit of XP because I don't want to be underleveled. And overall, I just think that the currency is really not in too bad of a state. But items, on the other hand, I have mixed feelings about. In Path of Exile 1, as all of us Path of Exile 1 players know, you'd be getting piles and piles of rare items and currencies, and you'd be spending them much more willy-nilly because they were much more common. Except for, of course, the rare ones, but leaving those aside, currency was relatively easy to get, and even if you couldn't easily get endgame items, you were still fairly easily able to make early middle endgame gear, and that, being able to make that without interacting with other players is something that I think was very nice about Path of Exile 1. In Path of Exile 2, I feel much more pressured to interact with other players, and that's not a bad thing. At least I personally don't mind playing on a trade league, but for example, my dad, who also plays this game, he is very big on solo self-found and playing on his own, and he does not like interacting with other people. If there was a way to describe him, I would describe him by the lyrics of Walk by Vantera. That's probably the best description of him I could give. He does not want to play with other people, he doesn't even want to smell them, he just wants to be left alone and do his own thing. And for him it's a little difficult to get gear because he has a hard time crafting. He's never been a big crafter of items, especially in Path of Exile 1. Whenever he needed stuff, I would usually show him how to do it or tell him what to get and do it on his computer for him, because he just didn't really feel like learning it. And that hasn't really changed in Path of Exile 2, to be honest. He's had a hard time finding the items he needs, and crafting is not as easy, however, because there's just not as many currency orbs. And so I'm finding that the item drops in the campaign at least, are kind of far and few between. So I'm hoping that the changes that they've implemented are going to make a little bit of a difference. I've played the game a little bit since they came out, and it does feel better, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes because I haven't played enough to see if it'll actually make a difference for me in the campaign or not, and I'm curious to find out. Something else I'm really thankful for with this game is just the fact that you can carry your microtransactions will carry over between the two games. It's not often that you see a game carry over purchasables from its predecessor, and I think that's something that's really special because I've dumped a fair share of money over years, of course, into the game, a couple $100, and I think it was well worth it because I think I was supporting a very good company, a game that I really enjoyed that was free at the time when I downloaded it, obviously, and I think it's a nice way to give back. And I was very surprised to see that all of my stash tabs and eventually my microtransactions for cosmetics are all going to carry over into the second game. I know there's been criticism in the past of GGG maybe making cash grabs over stash tabs because it's a problem that's the players face if they play for more than a few hours where they'll run out of stash tabs, because frankly 4 stash tabs is just not enough if you want to invest serious time into the game. And so I think that GGG really did something exceptional by translating or transferring microtransactions over the two games, because it really shows that they're not in it for the money, because it would have been very easy for them to do that, and I don't think many people would have batted an eye, especially if they gave people 1 or 2 extra starting stash tabs. But the fact that they let all of that carry over is really, really awesome, and I'm very thankful for it, at least being somebody who doesn't have tons of money to spend on video games. So overall, I definitely think that this is a huge positive for the game in general, and hopefully it sets a bit of a standard for other games. Maybe for games like Diablo, where they have lots of microtransactions that are obviously very expensive, maybe they'll consider doing something similar where if you spend X amount of dollars in Diablo 4, at least, maybe you get something in Diablo 5 when it inevitably comes out. Now, my biggest gripe with the game, although I know it's being addressed later this week, so that's very nice, are not being able to teleport between checkpoints, because the maps in Path of Exile 2 for every instance are enormous. It feels like I spend close to a half hour in an instance full clearing it, making sure everything's done, making sure I gained at least 1 level, and then moving on. And having to backtrack across the map to finish off dead ends that I passed because I had to choose a path to go down does kind of feel like a slog. It's not really fun having to run across the map for 2 full minutes just to kill 5 monsters because you skipped a dead end that you didn't go down, and then have to run all the way back. And this also in the campaign is frustrating too, because oftentimes I'll find myself finding an instance, for example, like if I'm in the cemetery, I might find the tomb of the consort and the tomb of the praetor, but I only want to go in the tomb of the consort first, and I find the tomb of the praetor first. I'll jump in and grab the waypoint so I can get back there, but there's also a checkpoint out there, and so I would prefer that if I go to the tomb of the consort, for example, I can just run to the checkpoint once I'm done, and then teleport back to it, rather than having to go out, portal to town, grab a waypoint, then teleport into the instance. And this is probably one of the lesser examples, considering this is a quick and easy thing with waypoints. There's a lot of instances that, or at least some instances, that don't have waypoints at them immediately, and frankly, it's a lot easier to be able to teleport to them via checkpoint, because I believe there's almost always a checkpoint if there's a new instance in the area you're in. So being able to teleport between those would save me a ton of time playing the game, and I think that's probably my #1 complaint. The last thing I wanted to mention about the game is the price. I know some people are skeptical of buying an early access game for $30 because of their worry about bugs in the game or glitches, and I just want to say that even though the game is in early access, and it's worth mentioning that there are definitely going to be changes that are going to mess with your character, there are going to be bugs most likely that you will inevitably find, I still think it's worth the $30. The logic I always use to describe video games is amount you're spending for the amount you're getting out of it. And I know a lot of people like to use this comparison, but it really does mean a lot when you sit down and think about it. Because, for example, if I were to go on, let's say, Diablo 4, and I spend $70 in Diablo 4 just to buy the game, if I can get 70 hours of entertainment out of that game, even if it's not my favorite game in the world, If I get 70 hours of entertainment out of that, that's $1 per hour. To go bowling with friends, for example, is probably like 15 bucks around where I live. And if you go out to bowl for $15 an hour, let's say it's an hour on the lane, that's $15 an hour of entertainment. And you could argue that, you know, bowling doesn't require any setup with a computer, or that bowling is more interactive with friends and whatnot. But I could also argue that playing a game, I'm socializing with my friends, just not necessarily in person. And even if a computer can be expensive to get, mine was only $500 and I can run the game just fine. And when you average it out amongst all of the hours I've put into games on my computer, it's probably cents per hour that we're talking about at this point, and it's definitely been worth the investment, at least for me, because I will make time to play games even if I don't necessarily have it. But overall, I do think that if you're going to spend the $30 on the early access, I think you will get more than 30 hours of entertainment out of it. At a minimum, if you're a slower player like me, at least in the campaign, I think you'll find very quickly that 30 hours is not too unreasonable to get through the first 3 acts, especially if you're just taking your time and clearing every instance and getting to know the game like I have been. And 30 hours just for the campaign, that's without even interacting in any repeated content, because once you get through the first 3 acts, you get into the cruel, and I think you could probably spend a good 30 hours in the first 3 acts without even getting to cruel if you really were taking your time, because I know it took me somewhere around there, maybe not quite 30, but close to it. Overall, I do think the game is in a very good state for early access. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of changes. There's already been some nerfs. Gas Grenade, my beloved, has been nerfed. But overall, I think the game is pretty nice, and I think it's worth giving it a shot. But those are just my opinions. Maybe let me know what you think down in the comments if you're enjoying the game as well. And I'll be sure to maybe make more videos in the future soon. But that's it for me. Take care.